My name is Victoria Matthews, but everyone calls me Tori. At 68 years old, I thought I had seen every curve life could throw at me. I was wrong. Dead wrong. I lived in a beautiful colonial home in suburban Connecticut that my late husband Robert and I had built together 41 years ago. Every corner held memories that felt like treasures. The kitchen where we'd shared morning coffee for decades. The living room where we'd watched our son Alexander take his first wobbly steps. The garden where Rob had proposed on one knee with dirt still under his fingernails from planting my favorite roses. That Tuesday morning in September started like any other ordinary day. I was tending to my prize-winning orchids in the sunroom, humming an old Beatles song that Rob used to love, when I first caught the scent of smoke. Living in New England, you get accustomed to the comforting smell of fireplaces and burning leaves, but this was different. This was acrid, chemical, wrong in every possible way. I stepped onto my back porch, coffee mug still in hand, and my heart nearly exploded in my chest. Orange flames were dancing up the side of Mrs. Henderson's house next door like demonic fingers, and the wind, God, that merciless wind, was carrying burning embers directly toward my property like a shower of tiny meteors. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped my phone as I dialed 911. "Please," I whispered to the dispatcher, watching 41 years of my life potentially going up in smoke. "Please hurry." The fire department arrived within minutes, their sirens screaming through our quiet neighborhood like banshees. But it was too late for Mrs. Henderson's house, and nearly too late for mine. The flames had already jumped to my roof with the hungry enthusiasm of a predator that had found its prey. Despite their heroic efforts, the firefighters could only save the foundation and one exterior wall. Everything else, the wedding photos, Rob's extensive book collection, my grandmother's china that had survived the Great Depression, the quilt I'd sewn for Alexander's first birthday with my own inexperienced hands, all of it was gone. I stood on the sidewalk, clutching my purse and wearing the same gardening clothes I'd put on that morning, watching my entire life transform into ash. And memories. The fire chief, a kind man named Captain Rodriguez with gentle eyes that had seen too much tragedy, placed a careful hand on my shoulder. "Mrs. Matthews, I'm so very sorry. Do you have somewhere to stay tonight? Family? Close friends?" I nodded, numbly, thinking immediately of Alexander. My son lived just 20 minutes away in a McMansion he was so incredibly proud of, complete with his wife Samantha and their 3 beautiful children. They had 3 spare bedrooms in that house. I'd helped Samantha decorate them myself. Surely they'd take me in while I figured out my next steps. Surely family meant something. "Yes," I told Captain Rodriguez with more confidence than I felt. "My son will take care of me." How catastrophically wrong I was. By evening, the shock was beginning to wear off like a numbing medication, and the brutal reality was setting in. I'd lost everything except the clothes on my back, the contents of my purse, and whatever was in my modest checking account. The insurance adjuster wouldn't arrive until the next day, and I had nowhere to sleep except my smoke-damaged Honda Civic. I drove to Alexander's house through streets that seemed foreign and hostile, the smell of burned memories clinging to everything like a curse. His house sat proudly on a perfectly manicured lawn in an upscale development called Willow Creek Estates, where every house looked exactly the same. Beige siding, black shutters, 3-car garages, and the kind of sterile perfection that homeowners, associations would fine you for disturbing. Alexander had always been particular about appearances, even as a child. He'd arrange his toys in perfect lines and throw spectacular tantrums if anything was out of place. Rob used to joke that our son would grow up to be either an architect or a dictator. Turns out he became something potentially worse, a successful real estate developer with a heart that had apparently calcified over the years. I stood on his front porch, noting the expensive pottery filled with perfectly arranged fall mums and the professionally installed Halloween decorations. It was only September 15th, But Samantha always decorated months early, as if rushing toward the next perfect moment. Through the large front windows, I could see my family gathered around their dining room table. Alexander, Samantha, and their 3 children, Madison at 17, Jackson at 15, and little Sophia at 9. They looked like a perfect American family straight out of a magazine, and despite my circumstances, I felt a moment of genuine pride. This was my son's success, my grandchildren's secure future. Surely they'd help their grandmother in her darkest hour. I rang the doorbell, and Jackson answered with that bright smile that reminded me so much of Rob. "Grandma Tori, what are you doing here?" Before I could answer, Alexander appeared behind him, and his expression immediately shifted from surprise to something that looked disturbingly like annoyance. He had inherited Rob's impressive height and my green eyes, but where Rob had been warm and welcoming to everyone, Alexander had grown cold and calculating over the years, like a man who had forgotten how to feel joy. "Mom, what are you doing here? We weren't expecting you." "Alexander, honey, I need to talk to you. There's been a fire." "Dad, let Grandma in," Madison called from the dining room, her voice filled with the easy kindness of youth. "We're having dessert." Alexander's jaw tightened visibly, but he stepped aside with obvious reluctance. I followed him into the dining room where Samantha barely looked up from serving apple pie that smelled like heaven. She'd always been polite but distant with me, treating me like an obligation rather than family, like something to be endured rather than embraced. "Hi, Mrs. Matthews," she said with that practiced smile she reserved for people she didn't particularly like. "What brings you by?" The children immediately gathered around me with the enthusiasm that only grandchildren can muster, excited to see their grandmother unexpectedly. Little Sophia hugged my legs tightly, getting soot on her pink pajamas, but I didn't have the heart to pull away from that pure, innocent love. "Kids, finish your dessert and go upstairs," Alexander commanded, his voice sharp with an authority that brooked no argument. "Grandma and I need to talk." "But Dad?" Madison started to protest, her teenage indignation flaring. "Now." The single word carried the weight of years of unquestioned authority. They grumbled, but obeyed, Sophia giving me one last squeeze before following her older siblings upstairs. Once they were gone, Alexander crossed his arms and waited with the patience of a man who had more important things to do. "My house burned down today," I said simply, the words feeling surreal in my mouth. "I've lost everything. I need somewhere to stay while I figure out what to do next." Samantha's fork clattered against her plate like a gunshot. Alexander's expression didn't change by even a fraction. "That's terrible, Mom. I'm sorry to hear that, but—" "But?" I echoed, not believing what I was hearing. "But we don't have space for you here. You'll need to find somewhere else to go." The words hit me like a physical blow, like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it nearly stopped beating. I looked around the dining room, taking in the formal table that could easily seat 12 people, the adjoining living room with expensive furniture that no one was allowed to sit on, the staircase leading to the second floor where I knew there were at least 4 bedrooms. "Alexander, you have 3 spare rooms. I just need a place to sleep while—" "Those aren't spare rooms, Mom. One is Samantha's office, one is the exercise room, and one is storage. We don't have space." Samantha nodded along like a bobblehead doll, her support automatic and unthinking. "It would really disrupt our routine to have someone staying here long-term." "I'm not talking about long-term," I said, desperation creeping into my voice. "Just until I can figure out my next steps. A few days, maybe a week." "No." Alexander's voice was final, like a judge delivering a sentence. "You'll have insurance money soon. Get a hotel. Or maybe it's time to consider one of those senior living places. You're getting up there, Mom. Maybe this is a sign." A sign? As if losing my home was some kind of divine intervention telling me to disappear into a nursing home at 68 years old. "Alexander, I'm your mother. I raised you, sacrificed for you, paid for your college when your father and I could barely afford it. I took care of you when you had pneumonia for 3 weeks junior year, missing work and risking my job to nurse you back to health. And you won't let me sleep on your couch for one night? That's all in the past, Mom. I have my own family to think about now. My responsibilities are to them, not to you. Samantha stood up and started clearing the dishes as if the conversation was over, as if I was just another dinner guest who had overstayed their welcome. Maybe your friend Margaret could help, she suggested without looking at me. Or that book, Club You're Always Talking About. Margaret had moved to Florida 6 months ago, and most of my book club friends were dealing with their own aging-related challenges. But Alexander didn't know that, because he never asked about my life unless it directly affected him. So you're saying no, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Your mother, who gave birth to you, raised you, loved you unconditionally for 43 years, is homeless, and you're saying no. Don't be dramatic, Mom. You're not homeless. You're just temporarily displaced. Insurance will take care of everything. Then came the words that would haunt me forever. Get out. They came from Alexander's mouth so quietly I almost didn't hear them. What? I whispered. Get out. You're making a scene and my neighbors might see. This is exactly why we can't have you staying here. Everything's always dramatic with you. Always about your feelings, your needs. I felt something inside me break that had nothing to do with the fire. This was deeper, more devastating than losing my house. This was losing my son. Alexander, get out! I looked at Samantha, hoping for some support, some feminine solidarity, but she was loading the dishwasher with her back to me like I didn't exist. I looked toward the stairs, hoping to say goodbye to my grandchildren, but Alexander blocked my path like a security guard. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I walked to the front door on unsteady legs, Alexander following behind me like he was escorting a trespasser off his property. At the threshold, I turned back one more time. I raised you better than this. You raised me to be independent, he replied coldly. Congratulations. It worked. The door closed in my face with a soft click, followed immediately by the sound of multiple locks engaging. I stood on the porch for a moment, staring at the Halloween decorations and feeling like a ghost myself. I sat in my car in Alexander's driveway, hands shaking as I tried to process what had just happened. My own son, the boy I'd rocked to sleep through countless nights, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged with infinite patience, whose dreams I'd supported even when they seemed impossible, had turned me away in my darkest hour. I needed to call someone. But who? My address book had burned with everything else, and I couldn't remember most phone numbers in our digital age where phones remember everything for us. But there was one number I'd never forgotten because I'd dialed it thousands of times over the past 40 years. My best friend, Isabella Rodriguez, though most people knew her by a very different name now. Isabella and I had met in 1983 when we were both struggling single mothers working at the Stamford Community Center. I was recently widowed after Rob died in a construction accident, trying to raise 5-year-old Alexander on a secretary's salary that barely covered rent. Isabella was a young immigrant from Mexico, cleaning offices at night while studying business. During the day, supporting her aging parents and 2 younger siblings she'd brought to America. We bonded over late-night conversations in the break room, sharing dreams that seemed impossible and struggles that felt insurmountable. Isabella was frighteningly brilliant about numbers, investments, and reading people's motivations like open books. She had a gift for seeing opportunities where others saw only obstacles. Someday, Tori, she used to tell me while we shared vending machine coffee at 2 a.m., I'm going to be so rich that I can help everyone who ever helped me. You'll see. I believed her, even when she was eating ramen noodles for the 4th night in a row and studying by candlelight because her electricity had been shut off. Isabella had a fire in her eyes that reminded me of Rob when he talked about his inventions. She was going to make something of herself, and nothing in this world was going to stop her. And she did. Boy, did she ever. Isabella started small, buying run-down properties with loans she had no business qualifying for and fixing them up herself. She learned plumbing, electrical work, carpentry, whatever it took. She flipped her first house for a modest profit, then bought 2 more. Within 5 years, she was developing entire neighborhoods. Within 10, she owned commercial properties across New England. By the time the 2008 recession hit, Isabella was wealthy enough to buy struggling companies at bargain prices. She diversified into technology, green energy, and international real estate. Forbes started tracking her net worth in 2015. Last I heard, she was worth somewhere north of $3.2 billion. But here's the thing about Isabella that made her special. Success never changed her core. She still remembered where she came from, still valued the people who'd been there during the hard times. We'd maintained our friendship through all her success, though we saw each other less frequently as her business empire grew global. Most people in Stamford had no idea that Isabella Rodriguez, the billionaire CEO of Meridian Development Corporation, was the same person who used to clean their office buildings at night. She kept her personal life extremely private, maintaining homes under different names and rarely appearing in society pages. Alexander certainly had no idea about my connection to Isabella. I'd never mentioned her by her business name, always, referring to her simply as my friend Isabella from work. In his self-absorbed world, he'd never been curious enough about my friendships to ask for details. Sitting in that driveway, feeling more alone than I had since Rob died, I pulled out my phone and dialed Isabella's private number. It was 9:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. She could be anywhere in the world, in any time zone, dealing with any crisis worth millions of dollars. But she answered on the second ring. "Tori, what a wonderful surprise. How are you, mi amor?" Her voice was exactly the same as it had been 40 years ago, warm, musical, genuinely happy to hear from me. In the background, I could hear the sound of waves and what might have been steel. Drums! "Isabella, I'm sorry to call so late. Are you somewhere tropical?" "Barbados. Just finished a hellish week of negotiations and decided to stay an extra day. The sunset here is incredible. But forget about me. You sound upset. What's wrong?" I broke down then, telling her everything. The fire, the insurance complications, going to Alexander's house, his rejection, sitting in his driveway with nowhere to go. Isabella listened without interrupting, making occasional sympathetic sounds that reminded me why I'd loved her for 4 decades. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then Isabella's voice came back, and it was different. Colder, sharper. The voice she probably used in boardrooms when someone had made a very expensive mistake. "He said what to you?" "Isabella, it's okay. I'll figure something out. I just needed to hear a friendly voice. Tori, listen to me very carefully. You're going to drive to the Marriott downtown, the one on Broad Street. Go to the front desk and tell them you're Mrs. Matthews, Isabella Rodriguez's guest. They'll have a suite waiting for you. Isabella, I can't let you pay for a hotel. That's too much. Tori, darling, I own that hotel. It's not costing me anything extra. And tomorrow morning I'm flying home. We're going to have breakfast and figure out your next steps. You don't need to cut your vacation short for me." "What vacation? I came here to buy the resort next door to this one. The deal closed an hour ago. I was flying back tomorrow anyway." That was Isabella, always making business sound casual, making grand gestures seem effortless. "Now go to the hotel. Promise me." "I promise, Isabella. Thank you. I don't know what I would have done." "You would have figured it out because you're one of the strongest women I know. But you don't have to figure it out alone. That's what friends are for." After I hung up, I sat in Alexander's driveway for another moment, looking at his perfect house with its perfect facade. Inside, my grandchildren were probably getting ready for bed, maybe wondering why Grandma had left so suddenly. Did they know what their father had done? Did they care? I started my car and drove away, heading toward a luxury suite and a future I couldn't yet imagine. In my rearview mirror, I saw a light go on in what I knew was Alexander's bedroom. I wondered if he was already regretting his decision, or if he was simply relieved to have gotten rid of an inconvenience. I would find out soon enough. The Marriott downtown was one of those gleaming towers that had transformed Stamford's skyline over the past decade. I'd driven past it countless times, never imagining I'd ever have reason to go inside. It was the kind of place where business executives stayed when they came to negotiate deals worth more than most people made in a lifetime. The lobby was a temple of marble and crystal, with modern art that probably cost more than my annual Social Security check. I felt underdressed in my soot-stained gardening clothes, carrying nothing but my purse and the lingering smell of smoke. The young woman at the front desk looked up with a professional smile that flickered when she saw my appearance. I could read her thoughts. Homeless person who wandered in from the street. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but wary. "I'm Mrs. Matthews, Isabella Rodriguez's guest." The transformation was immediate and startling. Her eyes widened, her posture straightened, and suddenly I was being treated like royalty. "Mrs. Matthews, of course. Ms. Rodriguez called ahead. We have the executive suite ready for you. Right this way, please." She came around from behind the desk personally, gesturing toward the elevator bank. Another employee appeared as if by magic to escort me, pressing the button for the top floor. "Ms. Rodriguez asked us to ensure you have everything you need," the young man said as we rode up. "Room service is available 24 hours, and we've stocked the suite with toiletries and a selection of clothing in your size. If there's anything else, just call the concierge." The elevator doors opened directly into the suite, and I gasped. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city lights twinkling like earthbound stars. The living area was larger than most apartments, furnished with elegant sofas and antiques that belonged in a museum. Through an archway, I could see a dining area with a table for 8 and a kitchen that would make any chef weep with envy. "The bedroom and bathroom are through here," my escort explained, leading me to another section of the suite. The bedroom featured a king-sized bed with linens that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The bathroom was a spa-like sanctuary with a jetted tub big enough for 2 people and a shower with more settings than my old television. In the closet, you'll find a selection of clothing. Ms. Rodriguez estimated your size and had items sent over from Saks. If anything doesn't fit properly, we can have alterations done overnight. I opened the closet door and found it filled with beautiful clothes still bearing price tags that made my eyes water. Sweaters, slacks, dresses, even pajamas and undergarments, everything in my exact size. How had Isabella remembered my measurements? "After all these years, this is too much," I whispered. Ms. Rodriguez also left instructions for the concierge to help you with any other needs, replacing documents, contacting insurance companies, whatever you require. She'll be joining you for breakfast at 9 a.m. in the restaurant downstairs. After he left, I stood in the middle of that magnificent suite and cried. Not from sadness this time, but from the overwhelming kindness of someone who remembered what it felt like to have nothing and was determined that her friend would never experience that feeling alone. I ran a bath in the enormous tub, using expensive bath salts that smelled like lavender and vanilla. As I soaked away the smoke and soot and heartbreak of the day, I thought about the contrast between Isabella's immediate generosity and Alexander's cold rejection. Isabella, who had business empires to run and billions of dollars in responsibilities, had dropped everything to help me. Alexander, who lived 20 minutes away and had spare bedrooms, had literally slammed the door in my face. I ordered room service, tomato soup and grilled cheese because comfort food seemed appropriate, and ate it while wearing silk pajamas. That probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. The soup tasted like childhood, like being cared for, like hope. As I settled into the impossibly comfortable bed, surrounded by luxury I'd never experienced, I wondered what tomorrow would bring. Isabella had said we would figure out my next steps, but I couldn't imagine what those might be at 68. How do you start over? How do you rebuild a life from nothing? I was about to find out that with Isabella Rodriguez as your friend, nothing was a relative term. I woke up in the executive suite feeling more rested than I had in months. The bed was like sleeping on a cloud, and for a moment I forgot where I was and why I was there. Then reality crashed back. The fire, Alexander's rejection, my uncertain future, but also Isabella's kindness, this beautiful suite, and the promise of breakfast with my oldest friend. I dressed in one of the outfits from the closet, elegant gray slacks and a soft blue sweater that felt like cashmere, because it probably was cashmere. Everything fit perfectly, as if Isabella had memorized my body measurements along with my phone number. The hotel restaurant was on the second floor, with windows overlooking the harbor. It was the kind of place where power lunches happened and million-dollar deals were closed over Eggs Benedict. I felt nervous walking in, even in my expensive new clothes, but the maître d' immediately recognized my name and led me to a corner table with the best view in the restaurant. Isabella was already waiting, and I barely recognized her. The last time I'd seen her was at Rob's funeral 3 years ago, where she'd worn a simple black dress and kept to herself in the back of the church. Now, she looked like what she was, one of the most powerful businesswomen in America. Her silver hair was styled in an elegant bob that probably required a team of professionals. She wore a perfectly tailored navy suit that screamed expensive, and jewelry that was understated but clearly valuable. She was reading something on her phone, probably making decisions that affected thousands of jobs. But the moment she saw me, her face lit up with the same warm smile I remembered from our late nights at the community center. "Tori!" She stood and embraced me, and for a moment she was just Isabella again, my friend who used to share her lunch when she couldn't afford 2 meals a day. "How did you sleep?" "Like a baby." "Isabella, that suite is incredible. You've been too generous." "Nonsense." "Sit. I've already ordered us coffee and fresh fruit. Are you hungry?" We settled into our chairs, and Isabella gestured to the server, who appeared instantly with a pot of what smelled like the best coffee I'd ever encountered. "Now," Isabella said, her business voice emerging, "let's talk about your situation. I made some calls last night. Your insurance company is Mutual Assurance, correct?" I nodded, surprised she'd remembered that detail from our phone conversation. "I know their CEO, Jim Morrison, and I serve on the Red Cross board together. Your claim will be processed with unusual efficiency. I promise you that. Isabella, you don't need to use your connections for me." "Why do you think I cultivated these connections in the first place? Money means nothing if you can't use it to help the people you care about." She pulled out her phone and showed me a series of photographs. "I also took the liberty of having my real estate team compile some options for you. There are several beautiful condominiums in excellent neighborhoods, all within your expected insurance settlement range." The photos showed gorgeous apartments with modern amenities and stunning views. Any one of them would be a significant upgrade from my old house. "They're all beautiful, but Isabella, I can't make decisions this quickly. Yesterday I was living in the same house I'd been in for 41 years. Today I'm sitting in a 5-star hotel looking at new homes. It's overwhelming." Isabella reached across the table and took my hand. "I know it's a lot, but here's what I've learned in business. When life forces you to make a change, you can either fight it and struggle, or you can embrace it and upgrade. Sometimes the best things come from the worst situations." Our food arrived, perfectly. Prepared Eggs Benedict for Isabella and the most delicious blueberry pancakes I'd ever tasted for me. As we ate, Isabella filled me in on her recent business ventures and travels. She was developing sustainable housing projects in 3 countries, had just acquired a chain of eco-friendly hotels, and was considering running for political office. "What about you?" she asked. "Besides yesterday's disaster, how have you been? Are you dating anyone?" Staying active? I laughed. Isabella, I'm 68 years old. My dating days are behind me. 68 is the new 58. My mother is 74 and has 2 boyfriends fighting over her in Tucson. Your mother always was a force of nature. Gets better with age. Speaking of age, tell me about Alexander. How did he take the news about the fire? I hesitated, not wanting to burden Isabella with more family drama, but her expression told me she already suspected the truth. He wouldn't let me stay with them, said they didn't have space. Isabella's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. Excuse me? He said they needed their spare rooms for other things. Told me to get a hotel. Isabella set down her cup very carefully, the way you handle something fragile when you're trying. Not to break it. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. Your house burned down yesterday, and your son, your only child, refused to let you stay in his home even temporarily. Isabella, it's complicated. He has his own family to think about. No. Her voice had that boardroom edge again. It's not complicated at all. It's simple, clear-cut, and absolutely unacceptable. She pulled out her phone and started typing. What's his full name and address? Isabella, what are you doing? Research. I like to know who I'm dealing with. You're not dealing with anyone. This is my family situation. Tori, you are my family. You're more family to me than my actual relatives in Mexico who only call when they need money. You were there for me when I had nothing, when I was nobody. You shared your lunch with me when I was too proud to admit I was hungry. I remembered those lunches. Nothing fancy, just sandwiches I'd pack extra of because I could see Isabella was struggling, but knew she'd never accept charity. You celebrated with me when I bought my first property, Isabella continued. Even though you were worried I was taking too big a risk, you were the only person who believed I could succeed when everyone else thought I was crazy. That's what friends do for each other. Exactly. So, let me do what friends do. She showed me her phone screen. Alexander Matthews, 43, owner of Stone Development Properties, lives at 847 Willow Creek Drive. Net worth approximately $2.3 million, mostly tied up in real estate investments. How did you find all that so quickly? I have very good researchers. And it turns out your son and I have something in common. We're both in the development business. Something in her tone made me nervous. Isabella, what are you thinking? I'm thinking that Alexander Matthews has been trying very hard to get a meeting with my company for the past 18 months. My stomach clenched. What? Isabella scrolled through more information on her phone. Stone Development has submitted 3 proposals for projects that would require Meridian's backing. Ambitious projects: a mixed-use development downtown, a luxury housing complex in Greenwich, and a commercial plaza in Westport. The kind of projects that could make a regional developer into a major player. I didn't know. Why would you? You never mentioned knowing me by my business name, and he never mentioned his mother's name in his correspondence. But I remember, now, at Rob's funeral, a young man came up to you after the service. Tall, dark hair, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. That was Alexander, wasn't it? I nodded, remembering how awkward Alexander had been that day, checking his phone constantly and leaving as soon as he could. He probably saw me there and didn't think anything of it. Just another old woman paying respects. Isabella's smile was sharp. How wrong he was. Isabella, whatever you're thinking, please don't. He's still my son. He's a son who turned his back on his mother in her time of need. But don't worry, I'm not going to do anything vindictive. I'm simply going to give him an opportunity to make things right. She signaled for the check, which was immediately whisked away. Apparently, when you own the hotel, you don't need to wait for bills. What kind of opportunity? The kind that will teach him the value of family. Isabella stood and gathered her purse. I need to make some calls. Why don't you spend the day at the spa downstairs? My treat. We'll have dinner tonight, and I'll tell you what I have in mind. Isabella. Trust me, Tori. By the time I'm done, Alexander will understand exactly what he threw away when he slammed that door in your face. As she walked away, heels clicking confidently on the marble floor, I realized that my quiet life of gardening and book clubs was officially over. Isabella Rodriguez was about to remind my son that some debts can't be paid with money. They can only be settled with respect. While I was enjoying the most luxurious spa day of my life, massages, facials, and treatments I couldn't even pronounce, Isabella was orchestrating what she would later describe as a masterclass in consequence management. I didn't know any of this was happening, of course. I was blissfully unaware, floating in a mineral pool and thinking about which of Isabella's condo options might feel like home. It wasn't until much later that I learned the details of Isabella's afternoon phone calls. The first call went to Jonathan Mitchell, Isabella's Director of Strategic Partnerships. Jonathan had been fielding Alexander's increasingly desperate attempts to get a meeting with Meridian Development for over a year. "Jonathan," Isabella said from her temporary office in the hotel's business center, "remember that Stone Development, company that's been pursuing the Greenwich project?" "Stone Development?" "Of course. Alexander Matthews has been calling weekly. Seems competent enough, good track record on smaller projects, but he needs serious capital backing to move into our league." "Why?" "I want you to call him today. Tell him we're interested in discussing the Greenwich project." There was a pause. Isabella rarely involved herself in the preliminary stages of partnership discussions. "Ma'am, I should mention that the preliminary analysis showed some concerns about their debt-to-equity ratio. They're leveraged pretty heavily on their current projects." "I know. That's why this call needs to happen today. Tell him we want to meet tomorrow morning. 10 a.m., our downtown offices." "Tomorrow? That's very fast. Usually we have at least a week of preliminary negotiations before." "Jonathan, just make the call." The second call went to Maria Santos, Isabella's head of background investigations. "Maria, I need a complete workup on Alexander Matthews of Stone Development. And I mean complete. Financial records, personal history, character references, the works. How deep do you want me to go?" "Deep enough to know what kind of man closes the door on his homeless mother." There was a brief silence. Maria had worked for Isabella for 8 years and knew better than to ask for explanations when her boss used that particular tone. "I'll have a preliminary report by end of business today." The third call was the most important. Isabella dialed Alexander's office directly. Meanwhile, at Stone Development Properties, Alexander was having the worst day of his professional life. 2 of his subcontractors had discovered cost overruns that morning. His biggest investor was asking uncomfortable questions about cash flow, and Samantha had called 3 times to complain about something the neighbors had said about last night's incident with his mother. "She made us look bad in front of the whole neighborhood," Samantha had hissed over the phone. "Mrs. Patterson saw her crying in her car in our driveway. She asked me this morning if everything was all right with your mother." "What did you tell her?" "I said she was going through a difficult time, but we had everything under control." "But Alexander, if people start thinking we don't take care of family, it could affect your business reputation." Alexander rubbed his temples. Everything was always about appearances with Samantha. She'd married him for his ambition and his potential. But lately both seemed to be stalling out. His assistant knocked on his office door. "Mr. Matthews, I have Jonathan Mitchell from Meridian Development on line 1. He says it's about the Greenwich project." Alexander nearly dropped his coffee. Meridian Development was the holy grail of development partners. Working with them could transform his company overnight. He'd been trying to get their attention for 18 months. "Put him through immediately." "Mr. Matthews, this is Jonathan Mitchell, Director of Strategic Partnerships at Meridian Development. We've reviewed your proposal for the Greenwich Luxury Housing Project, and Ms. Rodriguez would like to meet with you." Alexander's heart stopped. Isabella Rodriguez wanted to meet with him personally. The Isabella Rodriguez. That's wonderful news, Mr. Mitchell. When would be convenient?" "Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. at our downtown headquarters. Can you make it? Absolutely. Should I bring anything specific? Just your A game, Mr. Matthews. Ms. Rodriguez doesn't usually involve herself in preliminary partnerships. When she takes a personal interest, it means the potential for a very significant business relationship. After hanging up, Alexander sat in his chair for a full minute, staring at the phone. This was it. This was the break he'd been working toward for years. A partnership with Meridian could solve all his financial problems and launch him into the big leagues of development. He immediately called Samantha with the news. Isabella Rodriguez wants to meet with you? The Isabella Rodriguez? Tomorrow morning? This could change everything for us, Alex. This could be our ticket to the next level. Alexander spent the rest of the afternoon in frantic preparation. He researched Isabella's business history, studied Meridian's recent projects, and practiced his pitch until he could deliver it in his sleep. He even went out and bought a new suit, the most expensive one he'd ever owned. That evening, as he was rehearsing his presentation one more time, his phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize, Alexander Matthews speaking. Mr. Matthews, this is Isabella Rodriguez. Alexander's mouth went dry. The Isabella Rodriguez was calling him personally at home the night before their meeting. Ms. Rodriguez, what an honor. I'm very much looking forward to our meeting tomorrow. Actually, Mr. Matthews, that's why I'm calling. I always like to know something personal about my potential partners before we sit down to discuss business. It helps me understand what kind of people I'm working with. Of course, that makes perfect sense. Tell me about your family, Mr. Matthews. Are you married? Children? Alexander launched into his well-rehearsed description of his perfect family. Life: successful businessman, loving wife, 3 accomplished children, solid community ties. That sounds wonderful. And your parents? Are they still living? My father passed away when I was young. My mother is still alive. How lovely. Are you close with her? Something in Isabella's tone made Alexander pause. It was casual, conversational, but there was an undertone he couldn't identify. We have a good relationship, he said carefully. I'm sure you do. Family is so important, don't you think? I've always believed that how a person treats their family says everything about their character. I completely agree. Excellent. I'll see you tomorrow morning, Mr. Matthews. Sweet dreams. The line went dead, leaving Alexander with an odd feeling that he'd just been tested somehow. But the excitement of the upcoming meeting overrode any concerns. He went to bed dreaming of 7-figure deals and his name on buildings across Connecticut. He had no idea that across town, his mother was having dinner with the woman who could make or break his entire future. Isabella and I met for dinner in Dawanmitown, the hotel's private dining room, an intimate space that could seat 12 but felt cozy with just the 2 of us. The table was set with crystal and silver that probably cost more than most people's cars. But Isabella treated it like everyday dishware. How was the spa? She asked, as we settled in with glasses of wine that the sommelier assured us was exceptional. Incredible. I haven't felt this relaxed in years, but Isabella, you're spoiling me. This is all too much. This is nothing. Wait until you see what I have planned for Alexander. Something in her tone made me set down my wine glass. Isabella, what did you do? I made some phone calls. Your son has a meeting with me tomorrow morning to discuss a business partnership he's been desperately seeking. You didn't tell him who you were talking about, did you? Of course not. That would ruin the surprise. Isabella's smile was predatory. I also did some research on your son's business practices. She pulled out a folder thick with documents and photographs. Alexander's company is in trouble, Tori. Serious trouble. He's over-leveraged on 3 different projects, behind on payments, to contractors, and his biggest investor is getting nervous. How could you find all that out in one afternoon? When you have my resources, information is easy to come by. The interesting part is how he's been handling the pressure. Isabella opened the folder and showed me a series of photographs taken with telephoto lenses. Alexander at expensive restaurants, Samantha shopping at high-end boutiques, the family at a luxury resort that looked like it cost more than most. People's annual salary. These were all taken in the past month while his company was struggling to make payroll. He's been maintaining appearances while his business crumbles underneath him. Isabella, I know Alexander can be selfish, but he's not malicious. He's exactly like every other developer I've crushed over the years. All image, no substance. But here's the beautiful part. He doesn't know who he's really dealing with. The first course arrived. Some kind of delicate soup that tasted like heaven. Isabella barely touched hers, too focused on her plans. Tomorrow morning, Alexander will walk into my offices thinking he's about to secure the partnership that will save his company. Instead, he's going to get a lesson in consequences. What kind of lesson? The kind that teaches him what it costs to throw away the love of a good woman. Isabella leaned forward, her eyes bright with anticipation. Do you know what Alexander said to me when I called him tonight? You called him? I wanted to hear. His voice, get a sense of who I'm dealing with. I asked him about his family and he gave me this rehearsed speech about his perfect life. When I asked about you, he said you had a good relationship. My heart clenched. Even to a potential business partner, Alexander couldn't acknowledge the sacrifice and love I'd given him over the years. But here's the best part, Isabella continued. He has no idea that the homeless mother he turned away yesterday is best. Friends with the billionaire he's been desperately trying to impress for 18 months. The irony is so perfect it's almost poetic. Isabella, I don't want you to destroy his business. He has a family. And so do you. You are family. My family. And nobody hurts my family without consequences. The main course arrived. Perfectly. Prepared salmon with vegetables I couldn't identify, but that melted in my mouth. Isabella finally began eating, her planning apparently complete. I'm not going to destroy his business, Tori. I'm going to give him a choice. A very simple, very clear choice. What kind of choice? The kind that will show him, and everyone else, what really matters in life. Isabella wouldn't elaborate further, no matter how much I pressed. She changed the subject to lighter topics. Her latest acquisition, a funny story about her assistant's attempts to organize her chaotic schedule, gossip about mutual acquaintances from the old neighborhood. But I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. Isabella Rodriguez hadn't become a billionaire by being soft or forgiving. She'd built her empire by being ruthless when necessary. And tomorrow morning, Alexander was going to discover just how ruthless she could be. After dinner, as we said goodnight in the elevator, Isabella squeezed my hand. Get some rest, Tori. Tomorrow is going to be a very interesting day. Isabella, promise me you won't do anything that could hurt my grandchildren. Whatever issues I have with Alexander, they're innocent in all this. I promise. This isn't about hurting innocent people. This is about teaching one very selfish man the value of what he threw away. As I settled into the impossibly comfortable bed in my suite, I wondered what tomorrow would bring. Part of me was excited to see Alexander get his comeuppance, but part of me was terrified that Isabella's version of justice might cost me any chance of reconciliation with my son. I was about to learn that sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemy. It's showing them exactly what they lost when they chose pride over love. At exactly 9:45 a.m., Alexander Matthews walked into the lobby of Meridian Development Corporation's headquarters, dressed in his new $3,000 suit and carrying a leather briefcase that had cost more than some people's monthly rent. He had spent the morning perfecting his appearance, practicing his pitch one more time, and psyching himself up for the most important meeting of his professional life. The Meridian building was a testament to Isabella's success. 30 floors, of gleaming steel and glass in downtown Stamford, with her company's logo subtly integrated into the architecture. The lobby was intimidating in its elegance, with abstract sculptures that probably cost more than Alexander's house, and a waterfall, feature that created a sense of zen-like calm. Alexander announced himself to the receptionist, a polished young woman who immediately made a phone call. "Mr. Matthews is here for Ms. Rodriguez," she said into her headset. "Yes, ma'am. Right away." She turned back to Alexander with a professional smile. "Ms. Rodriguez will see you now. The elevator to your left will take you directly to the executive floor." As Alexander rode up to the 30th floor, he rehearsed his opening lines one more time. This was it, his chance to join the big leagues, to secure the kind of partnership that would set his family up for life. The elevator doors opened into a reception area that was more like a luxury living room. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the harbor, and the furniture looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. A woman in her 30s, impeccably dressed and radiating confidence, greeted him immediately. "Mr. Matthews, I'm Rebecca Chen, Ms. Rodriguez's executive assistant. She's waiting for you in the conference room." Alexander followed Rebecca down a hallway lined with awards and photographs documenting Isabella's rise to power. Pictures of groundbreaking ceremonies, ribbon cuttings, meetings with governors and senators. This was the kind of success Alexander dreamed of achieving. Rebecca opened a door to reveal a conference room dominated by a massive mahogany table surrounded by leather chairs that probably cost more than most people's cars. At the head of the table sat Isabella Rodriguez, and Alexander's first thought was that she was smaller than he'd expected. In person, she didn't look like someone who could buy and sell companies on a whim. She looked like someone's elegant grandmother. But when she looked up from her papers and met his eyes, Alexander felt the full force of her presence. This was a woman who commanded respect, who had clawed her way to the top of a brutal industry and stayed there through sheer will and intelligence. "Mr. Matthews," Isabella said, rising to shake his hand. Her grip was firm, her smile polite but not warm. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. Thank you for seeing me, Ms. Rodriguez. I've been hoping for this opportunity for a long time. I'm sure you have. Please sit." Alexander took the chair to Isabella's right, immediately pulling out his presentation materials. "I brought updated projections for the Greenwich project, along with— Actually, Mr. Matthews, before we discuss business, I'd like to talk about something else." Something in her tone made Alexander pause. "Of course, whatever you'd like to discuss." Isabella pressed a button on the conference table, and a large screen descended from the ceiling. She picked up a remote control with the casual ease of someone who gave presentations that affected millions of dollars. "I always research my potential partners thoroughly," she said, clicking to the first slide. "It helps me understand who I'm really dealing with." The screen showed a professional headshot of Alexander along with basic information about his company, his education, his family. "Impressive resume," Isabella continued. "University of Connecticut, MBA from Wharton, 15 years in development. Married to Samantha, 3 children." Alexander relaxed slightly. This was standard due diligence. "But I'm particularly interested in family relationships," Isabella said, clicking to the next slide. "I find that how a person treats their family tells me everything I need to know about their character." The new slide showed a photograph of Alexander's house, clearly taken recently, showing the perfect lawn and expensive Halloween decorations. "Beautiful. Home. 5 bedrooms, I believe. Yes, we've been very blessed." "Indeed. Plenty of room for family, I would imagine." Isabella clicked again, and Alexander's stomach lurched. The new slide showed security camera footage from his own front porch, time-stamped Tuesday evening, 8:47 p.m. In grainy black and white, he could see himself opening the front door, could die. See an older woman on his porch, could see the conversation that followed. "Interesting footage," Isabella said conversationally. "One of your neighbors has a very good security system. Amazing what you can see with the right equipment." Alexander's mouth went dry. "Ms. Rodriguez, I'm not sure what this has to do with our potential business relationship." "Everything, Mr. Matthews. You see, I believe character matters, and this footage shows me exactly what kind of character you possess. Isabella clicked the remote again, and suddenly Alexander could hear audio, along with the video, his own voice clear and cold. We don't have space for you here. You'll need to find somewhere else to go. And then an older woman's voice, broken and pleading. Alexander, you have 3 spare rooms. I just need a place to sleep while... Those aren't spare rooms, Mom. The word mom hung in the air like a physical presence. Isabella paused the recording at the moment when Alexander closed the door in his mother's face, freezing the image of an elderly woman standing alone on his porch with nowhere to go. Your mother, Mr. Matthews, the woman who raised you, who I'm guessing made countless sacrifices to help you become the man you are today. And this is how you treat her in her hour of need. Alexander's carefully prepared presentation scattered to the floor as his hands shook. Ms. Rodriguez, you don't understand the situation. My mother can be difficult. Our family dynamics are complicated. Complicated? Isabella's voice was ice. Let me tell you what I understand, Mr. Matthews. I understand that your mother's house burned down on Tuesday afternoon. I understand that she lost everything she owned. I understand that she came to you, her only child, asking for temporary shelter while she figured out her next steps. And I understand that you looked at this woman who gave you life and told her to get out. How do you know all this? Isabella clicked the remote again, and a new image appeared on the screen. It was a photograph from Rob's funeral 3 years ago. Alexander and me standing together by the gravesite, both of us looking uncomfortable in our formal clothes. Because, Mr. Matthews, the homeless mother you turned away on Tuesday night is my best friend. The conference room fell silent except for the sound of Alexander's labored breathing. Isabella let the revelation sink in for a long moment before continuing. Victoria Matthews and I have been friends for 40 years. We met when we were both struggling single mothers, working late-night jobs and dreaming of better lives for our children. She shared her lunch with me when I was too proud to admit I was hungry. She celebrated with me when I bought my first property. She believed in me when everyone else thought I was crazy. Isabella stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city she'd helped shape. Your mother never mentioned knowing me by my business name because she's not the type of person who name drops for social advantage. She values authentic relationships over networking opportunities. Clearly, that's a trait you didn't inherit. Alexander found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. She's your best friend? She's family. Real family. The kind that shows up when you need them, not the kind that slams doors in your face. Isabella turned back to face Alexander, and her expression was terrifying in its calm intensity. For 18 months, you've been desperately trying to get my attention. 18 months of phone calls, proposals, networking events, trying to find some connection that would get you in front of me. And all along, the person who could have opened that door with a single phone call was the woman you threw away like garbage. Alexander slumped in his chair, the full magnitude of his mistake crushing down on him. Ms. Rodriguez, I didn't... No. If I had known... If you had known what? That your mother was connected to someone powerful? That treating her well might benefit you professionally? Isabella's voice was deadly quiet. That's exactly the problem, Mr. Matthews. You should treat your mother well because she's your mother, not because it might advance your career. Isabella walked back to the conference table and gathered her papers. The Greenwich project you're so eager to discuss? I've reviewed your proposal. It's ambitious, well-researched, and would require approximately $40 million in backing to execute properly. Alexander's heart leaped despite everything. Maybe there was still a chance. It's also never going to happen. Not with Meridian's backing. And after I make a few phone calls, not with anyone else's backing either. Ms. Rodriguez, please. I have employees, contractors, families depending on my company. You should have thought about that before you chose cruelty over kindness. Isabella moved toward the door. This meeting is over, Mr. Matthews. Wait. Please, what can I do? How can I make this right? Isabella paused at the door, her hand on the handle. You can't. Some mistakes are permanent, Mr. Matthews. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. My mother. Where is she? Is she all right? For the first time, Isabella's expression softened slightly. She's safe, no thanks to you. Can I see her? Talk to her? That's not my decision to make. But if I were you, I'd think very carefully about what you're going to say when you call her. Because whatever words you choose might be the last ones she ever hears from you. Isabella opened the door, then turned back one final time. Your mother told me you were a good boy once. That you used to bring her flowers you picked from the neighbor's garden and tell her you were going to take care of her when you grew up. Her voice was sad now, disappointed rather than angry. I wonder what happened to that little boy? The door closed with a soft click, leaving Alexander alone in the conference room with the ruins of his professional dreams and the crushing weight of understanding what he had lost. Alexander sat in that conference room for 20 minutes after Isabella left, staring at the frozen image on the screen of himself closing the door on his mother. The security footage played on a loop in his mind. The look on my face, the way my shoulders had sagged in defeat, the sight of me standing alone on his porch with nowhere to go. When he finally gathered enough composure to leave the building, Alexander felt like he was walking through a nightmare. The elevator ride down felt endless. The lobby seemed to stretch forever, and every step toward his car was weighted with the knowledge that he had just destroyed his professional future and lost the most important relationship of his life in the span of 30 minutes. By the time he reached his car, the full reality was setting in. Isabella Rodriguez, the Isabella Rodriguez, was my best friend. The woman he'd been desperately trying to impress for over a year had watched him turn away her closest friend. The billionaire whose backing could have transformed his company had just witnessed him at his absolute worst. Alexander sat in his car in Meridian's parking garage and tried to process what had just happened. His phone buzzed with text messages from Samantha asking how the meeting had gone, from his assistant wanting to know when to expect him back at the office, from contractors demanding updates on payments. But all he could think about was the look in Isabella's eyes when she'd said, "Some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt." He drove home in a daze, knowing he needed to call me but having no idea what to say. What words could possibly undo what he'd done? How do you apologize for abandoning your mother in her darkest hour? How do you explain that you chose appearances over love, convenience over family? Samantha was waiting for him when he walked through the front door, her face bright with excitement. How did it go? Did you get the partnership? When do we sign the contracts? Alexander looked at his wife, beautiful, ambitious Samantha, who had married him for his potential and was constantly pushing him to achieve more, earn more, be more. In that moment, he saw her clearly for perhaps the first time in their marriage. Iscao.
Didn't go well? What do you mean, Alexander? This was our chance to move to the next level. What happened? Isabella Rodriguez is my mother's best friend.
Samantha stared at him blankly. What? My mother's best friend. The woman I turned away Tuesday night is Isabella Rodriguez's closest friend. Has been for 40 years. The color drained from Samantha's face as the implications sank in. Oh my God, Alexander, what did you do? I destroyed everything. My relationship with my mother, the partnership, probably my entire company. Samantha began pacing the living room, her hands fluttering nervously. Okay, we can fix this. You can apologize to your mother. Explain that it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Sam. We turned away my homeless mother because we didn't want to be inconvenienced. Don't put this on me. You made the decision. We made the decision together. We looked at a woman who had lost everything and decided she wasn't our problem. Samantha's expression hardened. She's not our problem, Alexander. We have our own family to think about, our own responsibilities. She is our family. She's my mother, the grandmother of our children. And we threw her away like she was nothing. For the first time in their marriage, Alexander saw Samantha's true nature clearly. The cold calculation behind her perfect smile, the way she valued appearances over substance, the complete absence of empathy for anyone who couldn't advance their social or financial position. I need to call her, Alexander said, pulling out his phone. Alexander, think about this carefully. What are you going to say? How are you going to fix this? But Alexander wasn't listening. He was scrolling through his contacts, looking for my number, his hands shaking as he tried to steady himself. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, I answered. Hello, Alexander. My voice was calm, neutral, giving nothing away. In the background, he could hear classical music and what sounded like the gentle clink of silverware against china. Mom, I need to talk to you. I need to explain. There's nothing to explain, Alexander. You made your position very clear. Tuesday night. Mom, please. I know I made a mistake. I know I hurt you, but I didn't understand the situation. I was stressed about work, Samantha and I. Where are you calling from, Alexander? The question caught him off guard. What? Where are you calling from? My house. The house with 5 bedrooms and 3 spare rooms that you told me you didn't have space in. Alexander's throat tightened. Mom, I know how that sounded, but it sounded exactly like what it was. Your mother needed help, and you decided I wasn't worth the inconvenience. That's not true. I love you, Mom. You know I love you. Do I? Because love isn't just words, Alexander. Love is action. Love is showing up when someone needs you. Love is making sacrifices for the people who matter most. Alexander could hear other voices in the background now, and he realized I wasn't alone. Mom, where are you? Are you okay? Do you have somewhere to stay? I'm fine, Alexander. I'm somewhere, safe, with people who understand what family really means. Can I see you? Can we meet somewhere and talk? There was a long pause. In the background, Alexander could hear a woman's voice, warm and accented, speaking in what sounded like Spanish. Then I was back on the line. I don't think that's a good idea right now. Mom, please. I met with Isabella Rodriguez today. I know she's your friend. I know I screwed up everything. You met with Isabella? She showed me security footage from Tuesday night of me turning you away. Another pause. Longer this time. What did you think would happen, Alexander? Did you think your actions wouldn't have consequences? Did you think you could treat your mother like garbage and it would never come back to you? I didn't mean for it to happen that way. I was overwhelmed, stressed about money, and Samantha was worried about the neighbors. Stop! My voice was sharp. Don't you dare blame Samantha for your choices. You're a grown man, Alexander. You made a decision and now you have to live with it. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Tell me how to fix this. Some things can't be fixed, Alexander. Some trust, once broken, can't be repaired. Don't say that. Please don't say that. You're my mother. I'm your son. We can work through this. Tuesday night, when I was standing on your porch, I was your mother. When I asked for help, I was your mother. When you closed the door in my face, you decided I wasn't. Alexander was crying now, not caring that Samantha was watching from the kitchen doorway with disgust. Mom, I need you. I've always needed you. I lost sight of what was important. Yes, you did. And now, you need to figure out what you're going to do about it. What do you mean? I mean, you need to decide who you want to be, Alexander. The man who abandons his family when they need him most, or the little boy who used to bring me flowers and promised to take care of me when he grew up. I want to be that little boy again. Then prove it. The line went quiet except for the background sounds of wherever I was, Comfortable, elegant, safe. Mom, are you still there? I'm here. How do I prove it? Tell me what to do. I can't tell. You what to do, Alexander. That's something you have to figure out for yourself. But I will say this. Whatever you decide, make sure it's because you want to be a better man, not because you want something from Isabella. And then the line went dead, leaving Alexander holding his phone and staring at Samantha, who was watching him with an expression of cold calculation. Well? She demanded. What did she say? Can you fix this? Alexander looked at his wife, really looked at her, and for the first time in their marriage, he saw exactly who he had become in order to please her. Selfish, shallow, willing to sacrifice anything and anyone for the appearance of success. I don't know, he said quietly, but I'm going to try. While Alexander was making his desperate phone calls, I was finishing lunch in Isabella's private dining room at the hotel, trying to process the morning's events. Isabella had returned from her meeting with Alexander looking satisfied, but not particularly happy. How did it go? I'd asked when she joined me at the table. Exactly as expected. Your son is everything I thought he would be. Ambitious, selfish, and completely unprepared for consequences. What did you tell him? The truth. That his homeless mother is my best friend, and that his 18-month campaign to win my business partnership died the moment he closed that door in your face. I pushed my salad around my plate, appetite gone. Isabella, I know I should feel vindicated, but I just feel sad. He's still my son. I know, mi amor. That's what makes you a better person than he deserves. When Alexander called that afternoon, Isabella had graciously moved to the living area of the suite to give me privacy, though I could see her listening intently to my side of the conversation. After I hung up, she rejoined me on the sofa. How was he? Devastated, crying. Says he wants to make things right. Of course he does, now that he knows what it's cost him professionally. Isabella, maybe he really is sorry. Maybe this was the wake-up call he needed. Isabella studied my face with the intense focus she probably used in boardroom negotiations. You want to forgive him? He's my son. I've loved him for 43 years. I can't just turn that off. You don't have to turn it off, but you also don't have to accept behavior that's beneath what you deserve. Isabella leaned forward, taking my hands in hers. Tori, I've seen this before. When people face real consequences for their actions, they often experience what looks like genuine remorse. But the question is whether they're sorry for what they did or just sorry they got caught. How do we tell the difference? By what they do next. Words are easy. Actions are hard. Isabella stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the late afternoon sun. I have an idea. A way to test whether Alexander's remorse is genuine or just panic about losing his business opportunities. What kind of test? The kind that will show him, and you, exactly what he values most. Isabella's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She glanced at the screen and smiled. Speaking of which, this is Jonathan Mitchell. He works for me, and I suspect he's about to tell me that your son has been calling the office repeatedly since our meeting ended. She answered the call on speaker. Jonathan, what can I do for you? Ms. Rodriguez, I've had 14 calls from Alexander Matthews since noon. He's desperate to speak with you again. Says there's been a misunderstanding about this morning's meeting. 14. Calls in 4 hours. That's impressive persistence. Should I schedule another meeting? Actually, yes, but not with me. Schedule a meeting with you for tomorrow afternoon. Tell him you might be able to arrange a second chance with me if he can. Demonstrate his commitment to family values. Family values? He'll know what that means. And Jonathan, make sure the meeting is scheduled for 2 p.m. at our downtown offices. Of course. Anything else? Yes. Have Maria compile a complete dossier on Alexander's financial situation. I want to know exactly how desperate he is. After hanging up, Isabella turned back to me with that predatory smile I was beginning to recognize. "What are you planning?" I asked. "I'm going to offer Alexander a choice. A very simple, very clear choice that will reveal his true character." Isabella spent the next hour making phone calls and sending emails, orchestrating something she wouldn't fully explain to me. I could hear fragments of conversations about contracts, deadlines, and making sure he understands the stakes. Finally, she put down her phone and rejoined me on the sofa. "Here's what's going to happen tomorrow. Jonathan will meet with Alexander and explain that I might be willing to reconsider our partnership, but only if Alexander can prove that he values family above profit." How does he prove that? By making a public gesture of respect and love toward his mother. A gesture that will cost him something significant. My stomach clenched. "Isabella, I don't want to be the subject of some public spectacle. It won't be a spectacle. It will be a moment of truth." Isabella's voice was gentle, but firm. "Tori, your son needs to learn that love requires sacrifice. That family isn't just convenient when it serves your purposes. It's a commitment that you honor, especially when it's difficult." "What kind of gesture?" "That's for Alexander to figure out. But it needs to be public. It needs to be genuine, and it needs to demonstrate that he's willing to put your well-being above his own reputation." Isabella's phone buzzed with a text message. She read it and smiled. "Speak of the devil. Alexander. Just called Jonathan's office again. Apparently he's willing to meet any conditions I set. He's desperate. Good. Desperation reveals character. We're about to find out whether your son is desperate enough to be a better man, or just desperate enough to say whatever he thinks I want to hear." That evening, Isabella and I had dinner at a small Italian restaurant she owned. Apparently, she'd been buying local businesses for years as investments. The owner, an elderly man named Giuseppe, treated Isabella like family, bringing us dishes that weren't on the menu and telling stories about the old neighborhood. "You see," Isabella said as Giuseppe regaled us with tales of his grandson's soccer achievements. "This is family. Giuseppe isn't related to me by blood, but he's part of my chosen family. He knows I'll always have his back, and I know he'd do anything for me." "Alexander used to be like that," I said quietly. "When he was little, he was so protective of me. After Rob died, Alexander would check on me every night before bed, making sure I wasn't crying." "What changed?" "I don't know. Maybe I did too much for him. Maybe I made things too easy. Maybe Samantha's influence was stronger than I realized, or maybe he just lost sight of what matters." Isabella raised her wine glass. "But people can change, Tori, if they have the right motivation. And if they don't, then at least you'll know the truth, and you can build a new family with people who appreciate what you bring to their lives." As we walked back to the hotel, Isabella's arm linked through mine. I realized that she was right. Over the past few days, Isabella had shown me more consideration, respect, and love than my own son had demonstrated in years. "Isabella, whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know how grateful I am. You saved me when I had nowhere else to turn. You saved me first, 40 years ago. You just never realized it." That night, as I lay in the luxurious bed in my suite, I thought about the choice Isabella was going to offer Alexander. Part of me hoped he would rise to the occasion, that he would find a way to demonstrate that our relationship mattered more than his pride or his reputation. But part of me was terrified that he would fail the test, and I would have to accept that the little boy who used to bring me stolen flowers had grown into a man who valued appearances more than love. Either way, I was about to learn who my son really was, and he was about to learn what it truly cost to throw away a mother's unconditional love. Alexander barely slept Tuesday night. He spent hours pacing his house, ignoring Samantha's increasingly frustrated questions and demands for explanations. By morning, he looked like a man who had aged a decade in a single day. At exactly 2 p.m., he walked into Meridian Development's offices for the second time in 2 days. But this time, he wasn't wearing an expensive suit or carrying a leather briefcase. This time, he looked like what he was. A desperate man who had finally realized the true cost of his choices. Jonathan Mitchell met him in the same conference room where Isabella had destroyed his world the day before. Jonathan was younger than Alexander had expected, maybe 35, with the confident bearing of someone who had never known real failure. "Mr. Matthews, thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." Alexander sat in the same chair he'd occupied yesterday, but everything felt different now. The room that had seemed impressive before now felt intimidating, a reminder of the power he had foolishly challenged. "Ms. Rodriguez asked me to meet with you to discuss the possibility of a second chance," Jonathan began, consulting his tablet. "She's not usually inclined to reconsider first impressions, but she has a personal interest in this situation." "Because of my mother?" "Yes. Ms. Rodriguez values loyalty above all else. The fact that you turned away her closest friend in her time of need has created what you might call a credibility problem." Alexander nodded, his throat tight. "I understand. I made a terrible mistake." "The question is whether it's a mistake you can fix or a character flaw that defines who you are." Jonathan pulled up a document on his tablet and turned it toward Alexander. "This is your current financial situation, Mr. Matthews. We've done our research." Alexander's heart sank as he saw the numbers laid out in brutal detail. His company's debt, the overdue payments to contractors, the loans that were coming due in the next 60 days. It was all there, accurate and damning. "You need this partnership," Jonathan continued. "Without Meridian's backing, Stone Development will be bankrupt. Within 90 days. I know. Good. Honesty is a start. Now, here's what Ms. Rodriguez is prepared to offer you." Jonathan swiped to a new document, and Alexander's eyes widened at the numbers on the screen. It wasn't just the partnership for the Greenwich project, it was a comprehensive development deal worth nearly $100 million over 5 years. This would solve all your financial problems and make you one of the most successful developers in Connecticut, Jonathan said. But it comes with conditions. "What kind of conditions?" "Ms. Rodriguez needs to know that you understand the value of family loyalty. She needs to see a public demonstration that you've learned from your mistakes." Alexander leaned forward. "What kind of demonstration?" "That's up to you, Mr. Matthews. But it needs to happen publicly. It needs to be genuine. And it needs to show that you're willing to put your mother's well-being above your own reputation or convenience." "Can you be more specific?" Jonathan shook his head. "The gesture has to come from your heart, not from a script we provide. Ms. Rodriguez will know the difference." He closed the tablet and looked directly at Alexander. "You have until Friday at 5 p.m. to make your choice. Either you find a way to publicly demonstrate your commitment to family values, or the deal is permanently off the table. And if I do this, whatever it is, Ms. Rodriguez will definitely move forward with the partnership." "If she believes your gesture is genuine, yes. But, Mr. Matthews, I should warn you. Isabella Rodriguez has an infallible radar for insincerity. If she suspects you're only doing this to save your business, the consequences will be far worse than simply losing a partnership." Alexander left the meeting with his head spinning. He had less than 4 days to come up with a public gesture that would prove his love for his mother, while somehow restoring his relationship with the most powerful businesswoman in Connecticut. But what kind of gesture would be enough? What could he possibly do that would undo the damage of turning away his homeless mother? Alexander spent Wednesday morning driving aimlessly around Stamford, trying to figure out how to publicly demonstrate something he wasn't sure he actually felt. Did he love his mother? Of course he did. But did he love her enough to risk his carefully constructed reputation? That was the question Isabella Rodriguez was really asking. His first stop was the local newspaper offices. Maybe he could take out a full-page ad apologizing to his mother, but that felt hollow, performative. Isabella would see right through it. His second stop was the community center where I had worked for so many years. Maybe he could make a donation in my honor. But again, it felt like buying his way out of trouble rather than demonstrating genuine change. By Thursday morning, Alexander was in full panic mode. Samantha had stopped speaking to him entirely after he'd explained the situation, and his children kept asking why Daddy looked so sad and why Grandma Tori hadn't visited lately. It was little Sophia who inadvertently gave him the idea. "Daddy," she said over breakfast, "can we visit Grandma Tori soon? I miss her stories." "What stories, sweetheart?" "The ones about when you were little. She says you used to bring her flowers from Mrs. Patterson's garden and tell her you were going to build her a castle someday. Flowers from Mrs. Patterson's garden." Alexander remembered those stolen bouquets, remembered my delighted laughter when he'd present them with the proud announcement that he was going to take care of me forever. Mrs. Patterson, his elderly neighbor, who had witnessed Tuesday night's confrontation. Mrs. Patterson, who had probably told half the neighborhood about seeing his mother crying in her car in his driveway, and suddenly, Alexander knew exactly what he had to do. Thursday afternoon, he knocked on Mrs. Patterson's door. She answered wearing her usual, suspicious expression, made more pronounced by the gossip she'd clearly been spreading about the Matthews family drama. "Hello, Alexander. How are you holding up?" "Mrs. Patterson, I need to ask you a favor. A big favor." "Oh?" "I need to borrow your front yard on Friday evening, and I need your help spreading the word about what I'm planning to do." Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows shot up to her hairline. "What exactly are you planning to do?" Alexander took a deep breath and explained his idea. As he talked, Mrs. Patterson's expression shifted from suspicion to surprise to something that might have been approval. "Well," she said when he finished, "it's about time you came to your senses. Your mother is a saint, and what you did to her was shameful. I know. That's why I need to make it right. Will you help me?" Mrs. Patterson considered for a moment, then nodded. "I'll make some calls. By tomorrow evening, half the neighborhood will know what's happening. Thank you. And Mrs. Patterson, I'm sorry about the flowers I used to steal from your garden when I was little." She smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. "Alexander, honey, I never minded those flowers. Your mother's face when you gave them to her was worth every rose in my garden." Friday afternoon, Alexander made one more phone call, this time to Rebecca Chen, Isabella's executive assistant. "Ms. Chen, this is Alexander Matthews. I need to get a message to Ms. Rodriguez." "I'm listening, Mr. Matthews. Tell her that at 6 p.m. tonight, I'll be at 847 Willow Creek Drive. And tell her that sometimes the best apologies happen where the worst mistakes were made." At 5:30 p.m. on Friday, Isabella and I were sitting in the back of her town car, driving through my old neighborhood toward Alexander's house. I was nervous in a way I hadn't been since my wedding day. That fluttery, stomach-twisting feeling that comes when you know your life is about to change, but you're not sure how. Isabella had received Alexander's message through her assistant and had immediately insisted we attend whatever he was planning. She'd been mysteriously secretive about her expectations, saying only that this should be interesting. As we turned onto Willow Creek Drive, I could see that something unusual was happening. Cars lined both sides of the street, and people were gathered on lawns and sidewalks as if waiting for some kind of event. "Isabella, what is all this?" "I have no idea, but your son certainly knows how to draw a crowd." Our driver pulled up across the street from Alexander's house, and I could see him standing in Mrs. Patterson's front yard, looking nervous and determined. He was wearing jeans and a simple button-down shirt, more casual than I'd seen him in years. In his hands, he held a bouquet of roses that looked suspiciously familiar. Samantha was nowhere to be seen, but his 3 children stood nearby with expressions ranging from curiosity to embarrassment. Madison, his 17-year-old, kept checking her phone and looking like she wanted to disappear. Jackson seemed intrigued by the crowd. Little Sophia was beaming like this was the best entertainment she'd seen all week. As Isabella and I got out of the car, I noticed familiar faces throughout the crowd. Neighbors I'd known for decades, people from the community center, even some of Alexander's business associates. Whatever my son was planning, he'd made sure it would be witnessed by everyone who mattered in both our lives. Alexander saw me approaching and walked over, the roses clutched tightly in his hands. Up close, I could see that he'd been crying. His eyes were red-rimmed and swollen. "Mom," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Hello, Alexander." He glanced at Isabella, who was standing slightly behind me with an expression of polite interest. "Ms. Rodriguez, thank you for coming." "I wouldn't miss it, Mr. Matthews. I'm very curious to see what kind of gesture warrants this kind of audience." Alexander nodded, then looked back at me. "Mom, I need to say some things to you in front of everyone, because what I did wrong was public, and making it right needs to be public too." He walked back to the center of Mrs. Patterson's yard, and the crowd grew quiet. Even the children stopped their chatter as Alexander raised his voice to address the neighborhood. "Most of you know me as Alexander Matthews. I live in the house behind me with my wife and 3 children. I've been your neighbor for 8 years, and I've tried to be the kind of person you could respect. Successful, responsible, someone who took care of his family and his obligations." He paused, looking down at the roses in his hands. "But this week, I discovered that you can look like a good man on the outside while being a failure on the inside. You can have a beautiful house and a successful business and still be spiritually bankrupt." A murmur went through the crowd. This wasn't what anyone had expected. Tuesday night, my mother came to my door. Her house had burned down that afternoon, and she'd lost everything she owned. She was 68 years old, homeless, and she came to her son for help. Alexander's voice cracked, but he continued, and I turned her away. I looked at this woman who gave me life, who raised me, who sacrificed for me every day of my childhood, and I told her we didn't have room for her in our house. I closed the door in her face and left her sitting in her car in my driveway with nowhere to go. The crowd was completely silent now. I could see shock and disapproval on faces throughout the yard. Some of you saw her that night. Mrs. Patterson, you asked Samantha the next day if everything was all right with my mother. Mr. Rodriguez, you waved to her from your window and wondered why she looked so upset. Alexander turned to face me directly. "Mom, when I was 8 years old, I used to steal roses from Mrs. Patterson's garden to bring to you. I'd tell you I was going to build you a castle someday, that I was going to take care of you forever." He held up the bouquet, clearly roses, from Mrs. Patterson's garden, just like the ones he'd brought me 40 years ago. I broke that promise Tuesday night. I became a man who values appearances more than love, convenience more than loyalty. I became someone I don't recognize and someone I don't want to be. He walked over to where I was standing and held out the roses. "These flowers are from Mrs. Patterson's garden, just like the ones I used to bring you when I was little. Mrs. Patterson gave me permission to pick them today because she remembers how happy they used to make you." I took the roses with trembling hands, breathing in their familiar scent. "Mom, I can't undo what I did Tuesday night. I can't take back the pain I caused you or the trust I broke. But I can promise you this. It will never happen again. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, for the rest of my life I will be there." He dropped to his knees in front of me, right there in Mrs. Patterson's yard, in front of half the neighborhood. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I haven't earned the right to be called your son after what I did. But I'm asking anyway, because I love you more than my pride, more than my reputation, more than anything else in this world." The crowd was completely silent. I could see people wiping their eyes, including several of the men who probably hadn't cried in public since they were children. "Will you give me another chance, Mom? Will you let me try to be the son you deserved all along?" I looked down at my son, kneeling in the grass with tears streaming down his face. and I saw not the successful businessman who had hurt me so deeply, but the little boy who used to promise to build me castles. "Stand up, Alexander." He rose slowly, uncertainly. "Do you remember what I used to tell you when you were little and you'd make a mistake?" He nodded. "You'd say that love means always getting another chance to do better." "That's right. And do you know why I said that? Because you loved me even when I didn't deserve it." I reached up and touched his face, the way I used to when he was small and needed comfort. "I still love you, Alexander. I never stopped loving you, even when you broke my heart Tuesday night." "Does that mean you forgive me?" "It means I'm willing to let you try again." "But Alexander, this can't just be words. You have to show me through your actions that you've really changed." He nodded eagerly. "Anything, Mom. Whatever it takes." I glanced at Isabella, who was watching the scene with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Then your first action is to apologize to Ms. Rodriguez for wasting her time with your business proposal. A man who doesn't honor his family doesn't deserve to be trusted with other people's money." Alexander's face went pale, but he turned to Isabella without hesitation. "Ms. Rodriguez, I apologize for approaching you under false pretenses. I've been trying to win your partnership for over a year, but I'm not worthy of it. A man who abandons his mother in her time of need isn't someone you should trust with $40 million of backing." Isabella studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Matthews, do you know why I insisted on meeting with you yesterday? To show me the consequences of my actions? Partly, but also to see what kind of man you really were underneath the business suits and practiced presentations." She gestured toward the crowd of neighbors still watching our drama unfold. This gesture, public, humbling, genuine, tells me more about your character than any business proposal ever could. Alexander looked confused. "I don't understand." Isabella smiled, and for the first time since I'd known her, it was a truly warm expression directed at my son. "Mr. Matthews, any fool can make money, but it takes a real man to admit when he's wrong and do whatever it takes to make things right." She extended her hand to him. "If you're interested, I'd like to discuss that partnership after all." The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Alexander stared at Isabella's outstretched hand like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. But I thought, after what I did— "What you did was terrible," Isabella said firmly. "But what you just did took more courage than most men possess. You humbled yourself in front of your entire community to honor your mother. That's the kind of character I want in a business partner." Alexander shook her hand, still looking stunned. "Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. I won't let you down." "See that you don't. And Mr. Matthews, your mother will be staying in my guest house for as long as she wants. When you visit her, and you will visit her regularly, you'll do so as a son who understands what a privilege it is to have a woman like Victoria Matthews in his life." As the crowd began to disperse, chattering excitedly about what they'd just witnessed, Alexander turned back to me. "Mom, can you ever really forgive me? Can we start over?" I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw something I hadn't seen in years: humility, genuine remorse, and beneath it all, the little boy who used to bring me stolen flowers and promise to build me castles. "We don't need to start over, Alexander. We just need to do better going forward." "I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. I always have." As Isabella and I walked back to her car, I could hear Alexander explaining to his children what had just happened, his voice full of emotion as he told them about the importance of family and keeping promises. "Well," Isabella said as we settled into the back seat, "that was unexpected. Did you know he was going to do that?" "I had no idea. I thought he might make a donation to charity in your name or take out a newspaper ad. I never expected him to humble himself so completely in front of his entire community. Does this mean you're really going to give him the partnership?" "Tori, your son just proved that he values his relationship with you more than his pride or his reputation. That's exactly the kind of person I want to do business with. As we drove away from Willow Creek Drive, I clutched Alexander's roses and thought about the strange turns life can take. A week ago, I'd been a widow living quietly in my garden. Tonight, I was staying in a billionaire's guest house, having just watched my son risk everything to win back my love. Isabella, what happens now? Now? Now you get to decide what comes next. You can move into one of those condos I showed you, or you can stay in my guest house for as long as you want. You can rebuild your old life, or you can try something completely new. What do you think I should do? I think you should stop worrying about what other people need from you and start thinking about what would make you happy. For the first time in years, I realized I didn't know the answer to that question. But for the first time in years, I was excited to find out. 5 years after the fire that changed everything, Isabella and I stood together at the groundbreaking ceremony for the Victoria Matthews Center for Emergency Housing, the first facility built by our foundation. The irony wasn't lost on me that a building designed to help displaced families bore the name of someone who had once been homeless herself. The ceremony was held on a beautiful October morning, with crisp air that smelled of fallen leaves and new possibilities. A crowd of several hundred people had gathered: local politicians, business leaders, families who would benefit from the center's services, and most importantly, my own family. Alexander stood with Samantha and the children in the front row, wearing an expression of pride that made my heart swell. Over the past 5 years, our relationship had continued to deepen. He called every day, visited every weekend, and had become one of the foundation's most dedicated volunteer board members. More surprisingly, Samantha had also transformed. She'd started volunteering at the community center where Isabella and I had first met, teaching financial literacy classes to single mothers. Her motivations might have started as social networking, but somewhere along the way, she'd discovered genuine satisfaction in helping others. "Ladies and gentlemen," the mayor said into the microphone, "it's my pleasure to introduce the woman whose vision made this center possible, Isabella Rodriguez, CEO of Meridian Development and founder of the Rodriguez Family Foundation." Isabella stepped up to the podium, looking every inch the powerful businesswoman she was. But when she looked out at the crowd, her eyes found mine first, and her smile was the same warm expression I'd been seeing for 45 years. "Thanks you all for being here today," she began. "This center represents more than just another building. It represents hope for families who have lost everything, and proof that when we lift each other up, we all rise together." She gestured toward the architectural rendering displayed beside the podium. "The Victoria Matthews Center will provide temporary housing for up to 50 families at a time, along with job training, childcare, and support services designed to help people rebuild their lives after disaster. But more than that, it will provide something that can't be measured in statistics. It will provide dignity." Isabella's voice grew stronger as she warmed to her subject. "Dignity is what my dear friend Victoria taught me 45 years ago, when we were both struggling single mothers trying to build better lives for our children. Dignity is what she showed me when she shared her lunch without making me feel like a charity case. Dignity is what she deserved when her house burned down 5 years ago. And dignity is what every family who stays in this center will receive." She paused, looking directly at Alexander in the crowd. "This center exists because one woman's worst day became the catalyst for something beautiful. Because sometimes our deepest losses reveal our greatest strengths. And because, as Victoria always says, family isn't just about blood. It's about showing up when someone needs you most." The crowd applauded as Isabella handed me the golden shovel for the ceremonial groundbreaking. As I lifted the first scoop of earth, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. 5 years ago, I'd been standing in the ashes of my old life. Today, I was planting seeds for a future I never could have imagined. After the ceremony, as people mingled and enjoyed the catered lunch Isabella had provided, Alexander approached me with his family in tow. Mom, I'm so proud of you, he said, embracing me warmly. Dad would have been amazed to see what you've accomplished. Your father would have been proud of both of us. But mostly, he would have been relieved that we finally figured out what really matters. Little Sophia, now 13, tugged on my dress. Grandma Tori, are you famous now? I laughed, picking her up despite my formal clothes. What makes you think I'm famous, sweetheart? There were photographers here, and that lady with the microphone wanted to talk to you. Being in the newspaper doesn't make you famous, Sophia. It just means you did something people thought was interesting. What did you do that was interesting? I looked at Alexander, then at Isabella, who was chatting with donors nearby, then at the construction site where the center would soon stand. I learned that it's never too late to start over, and that the best adventures happen when you think your story is already finished. Jackson, now 20, had been unusually quiet during the ceremony. Now he spoke up. Grandma, can I ask you something kind of personal? Of course. Are you mad at Dad for what happened? I mean, really mad? Deep down? It was a perceptive question from a young man who was probably grappling with concepts of forgiveness and consequences in his own life. Jackson, I was hurt by what your father did. Deeply hurt. But anger is like holding a hot coal. It burns the person carrying it more than anyone else. So you're not mad anymore? I'm grateful. What your father did was wrong, but it led to something wonderful. I got my best friend back in my life. I found work that matters to me. And most importantly, your father learned what kind of man he really wanted to be. Alexander's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Mom, I'll never stop being sorry for that night. Good, I said firmly. The day you stop being sorry is the day you might make the same mistake again. But Alexander, you don't need to carry guilt forever. You need to carry the lesson. Madison, now 22 and preparing for graduate school, had been listening to our conversation with the intensity she brought to everything important. Grandma, I'm writing my thesis about family dynamics and second chances. Can I interview you and Dad together sometime? I'd be honored. What's your thesis? That the strongest families aren't the ones that never break. They're the ones that know how to heal. I looked at this remarkable young woman who had grown up watching her father's transformation, and I realized that perhaps the most important outcome of this entire ordeal was the lesson it had taught my grandchildren about love, forgiveness, and the courage to change. As the afternoon wound down and guests began to leave, Isabella and I found ourselves alone at the construction site, looking at the place where the Victoria Matthews Center would soon welcome its first families. Any regrets? Isabella asked. About the quiet life you gave up? The simple routine? The predictable days? I considered the question seriously. 5 years ago, my biggest decision was what to have for lunch. Now I was helping to shape policy, speaking at conferences and managing a budget that affected hundreds of lives. Isabella, do you know what I miss most about my old life? What? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. We stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the construction site where hope would soon take physical form. Isabella, can I ask you something? Anything. That night when I called you from Alexander's driveway, did you already know what you were going to do? I knew I was going to help you. I knew I was going to make Alexander face consequences for his actions, but I had no idea it would lead to all this. She gestured at the construction site, then at Alexander's family, packing up their picnic supplies. Nearby. Sometimes the best outcomes are the ones we never planned for, and sometimes the worst days lead to the best years. Speaking of which, Isabella said, pulling an envelope from her purse, I have something for you. I opened the envelope to find a deed, not to a condo or apartment, but to Isabella's guest house, which she was officially giving to me. Isabella, I can't accept this. It's too much. Tori, you've been my family for 45 years. Family doesn't rent from family. Besides, I need you close by. We have too much work to do. What kind of work? Isabella's eyes sparkled with the same mischievous light I'd seen when she used to plan her first real estate deals. 3 more cities have asked us to build emergency housing centers. A university wants us to develop a curriculum for disaster response social work. And a publisher wants you to write a book about starting over after loss. A book? Isabella, I'm not a writer. You're a storyteller. You're a woman who lived through something terrible and came out stronger. You're exactly the kind of writer the world needs. As we walked back toward our cars, I thought about Isabella's words. 5 years ago, I would have insisted that I had nothing important to say, that my story wasn't worth telling. Now I realize that every woman who had ever felt discarded, overlooked, or forgotten needed to hear that it's never too late for a second act. What would I call it? I asked. How about When the House Burns Down? How I Lost Everything and Found Myself. I laughed. That's perfect. Though I think the subtitle should be How My Son's Rejection Led to My Greatest Adventure. Even better. We'll make sure Alexander writes the foreword. As we reached our cars, Alexander jogged over to us, slightly out of breath. Mom, Isabella, I wanted to catch you before you left. I have some news. What kind of news? Isabella asked. Samantha and I have been talking, and we want to make a significant donation to the foundation. Not just money, though there will be plenty of that, but time. Real time. He looked at me with the earnest expression I remembered from his childhood. Mom, I know I can't undo what I did that night, but I can spend the rest of my life making sure other families don't go through what we went through, what I put you through. What are you proposing? I want to establish a rapid response team for families facing housing emergencies. When someone's house burns down, or they face eviction, or any other crisis that leaves them homeless, we'll have resources ready to deploy immediately. Housing, counseling, legal aid, whatever they need. Isabella and I exchanged glances. It was a sophisticated proposal, the kind that usually took months of planning. How long have you been working on this? Isabella asked. Since the night I knelt, in Mrs. Patterson's yard. I've been meeting with social workers, emergency responders, insurance companies, anyone who deals with housing crises. I want to make sure no parent ever has to stand on their child's doorstep begging for help. I felt tears pricking my eyes. This wasn't just charity or guilt. This was Alexander transforming his deepest shame into his greatest purpose. What would you call this program? I asked. The Second Chance initiative that Alexander launched has helped over 3,000 families navigate housing crises. Samantha, who shocked everyone by discovering a genuine gift for counseling, now runs our family services department. Madison graduated from college with a degree in social work and joined our team immediately. Jackson is studying architecture with plans to design affordable housing. Even little Sophia, now 13, volunteers here every weekend. Isabella and I published the book. It became a bestseller and spawned a speaking tour that took us to 48 states. We donated all the proceeds to expand our programs, but perhaps the most meaningful change has been in my relationship with Alexander. He calls every day, not out of guilt or obligation, but because we've become genuine friends. He's learned to value people over profit, relationships over reputation. And I've learned that forgiveness isn't a single act. It's a daily choice to love someone despite their imperfections. The old Victoria Matthews, the one who lived quietly in her garden and accepted whatever life handed her, is gone. In her place is a woman who understands that the most beautiful gardens grow from the richest soil, and sometimes that soil comes from the ashes of what came before. My house burned down 5 years ago, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because losing everything was good, but because sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what you're really made of. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom to realize you were meant to build mountains. And sometimes the people who hurt you most become the people who love you best, if you're brave enough to give them a second chance to get it right. Isabella was right, as always. The best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. The best revenge is building a life so beautiful, so meaningful, so full of love that your enemies realize what they almost missed out on. And then, if you're very lucky and very wise, you invite them to join you in building something even better together. The fire that destroyed my house lit a flame that changed everything: my family, my purpose, my understanding of what it means to live a life that matters. Some burns heal. Others transform you into something stronger than you ever imagined you could be. I choose transformation every single day, and I've never been happier. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this story touched your heart, remember that it's never too late for a second chance. Your story matters too, and your greatest chapter might be the one you haven't written yet. Remember, when life burns your house down, don't just rebuild. Build something better. Build something that matters. Build a life worth living. Until next time, this is Victoria Matthews, reminding you that your greatest adventure might be waiting on the other side of your worst day chance initiative. Because everyone deserves a second chance, and no one should have to face their worst day alone. Isabella was nodding approvingly. How much are we talking about for startup costs? $2 million initially, then operating funds of about $500,000 million annually. Done. But I have one condition. Alexander looked nervous. What's the condition? You run it personally, not as a board member or advisor, as the full-time director. Your development company is successful enough now to function without your daily involvement. You want me to leave the business I built? I want you to build something better, something that matters more than profit margins. Alexander looked at me, seeking approval or guidance. It's your choice, sweetheart. But I think your father would be proud to see you use your talents to help people instead of just making money. What about Samantha? The kids? Our lifestyle? Alexander, Isabella said, you're a millionaire several times over thanks to our partnership. You can afford to follow your conscience. And, I added, your children will learn that success isn't just about what you achieve for yourself. It's about what you do for others. Alexander stood there for a moment, and I could see him mentally shifting from the businessman he'd been to the humanitarian he was choosing to become. Okay. Yes. I'll do it. Isabella extended her hand. Welcome to the family business, Alexander. Family business? Didn't your mother tell you? The Rodriguez Family Foundation is exactly that, a family foundation, and your family now. As we finally parted ways that evening, I realized that the circle had closed in the most beautiful possible way. The son who had rejected me in my time of need had become a man dedicated to ensuring no one else would face that rejection. The business partnership Isabella had offered as a test had evolved into something much more meaningful. And I, the woman who had lost everything in a house fire, had found a family, a purpose, and a future I'd never dared to imagine. I'm writing these final words from my office in the Victoria Matthews Center, which has become the model for similar facilities in 12 cities across 3 states. Through the window, I can see families arriving for intake appointments, children playing in the courtyard, and adults attending job training classes. The SecOn,